Welcome to Brunettes Who Bitch, where the sports are hot, the takes are hotter, and we don't hold back because life's too short to sugarcoat anything. Welcome back to Brunettes Who Bitch. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the importance of taking a mental break when life or work feels overwhelming, kind of like how sports teams take timeouts. Timeouts aren't just for the players on the court, they're for all of us when life gets overwhelming. Sometimes the best move is to take a pause.
Timeout in sports is often a critical moment for a reset, strategy change, or recovery. It's not about quitting, but recalibrating. So, we have a few sports references we want to share from pivotal moments where there were timeouts that led to a breakthrough. The first one is Michael Jordan's flu game of 1997. Now, most of us are too young to remember that, but it's literally like it's still talked about today. Like if you follow the NBA at all, it is still something that's talked about. Game 5 of the 1997 NBA Finals, Chicago Bulls versus Utah Jazz. Michael Jordan was visibly ill, reportedly suffering from flu-like symptoms, but he still
Gross.
played through it. And
I could
the
never.
Chicago crowd was not sure if Jordan was even going to show up, let alone play. And while Jordan was struggling physically, his teammates would call timeouts to slow the game down, allowing for him to catch his breath, recover, and then continue playing. In the final minutes of the game, Jordan looked exhausted. The Bulls utilized the timeout strategically to give Jordan and the team time to regroup and ensure the offense could flow smoothly. So Michael Jordan didn't let exhaustion or illness stop him. He didn't just keep going through the motions. He took a step back when he needed to regain focus and composure. This could mirror personal situations where we might feel physically or mentally drained. A timeout can give us the time and space to recharge and refocus, leading to greater performance or clarity when we come back.
Okay, so we're going to talk about Super Bowl 51, which was the New England Patriots versus the Atlanta Falcons in 2017. Um, the Falcons were leading the Patriots 28-3 midway through the third quarter. That sounds terrible. um, historic deficit that left many assuming the Falcons had already won, which, I mean, understandably so, right? When you're that far down. Bill Belichick of the Patriots called a timeout that helped the team reset their game plan. The timeout wasn't dramatic on the surface, but it allowed Belichick and his staff to focus the team and reframe the game. They used this timeout to cool down, break the game into smaller moments, and start focusing on executing plays with precision. Very important. The Patriots then proceeded to score 25 unanswered points and eventually win the Super Bowl in overtime, completing one of the greatest comebacks in sports history. Much like life, when things seem completely out of control or overwhelming, it's easy to panic. I know that all too well. The timeout here is a perfect example of how stepping back, breaking down the problem, and resetting your mindset can actually change the trajectory of the situation. When you're in personal crisis or burnout, it's essential to take a mental timeout to reassess your strategy and refocus on what's important.
Honestly, that comeback's insane. Like
It
one
is.
of
That's crazy. 28 to
That
3, and you
almost
managed to
seems
come
like
back with like
inhuman.
what? How much time do they have? Like
figure
18
it was
minutes?
somewhere in the third quarter, and you have your 15 minutes of your fourth quarter, so probably 20, let's say 25 minutes, maybe tops.
Yeah.
Insane.
Props to them, honestly. Good for them.
I was gonna say, I'm not even a football fan, and even I know that's like impressive.
It is impressive. We're hopping back over to basketball. We're going to talk a little bit about LeBron James in the 2016 NBA Finals.
Boo.
Real. The Cleveland Cavs were facing off against the Golden State Warriors in Game 7 of the 2016 Finals. The Warriors had a
I
3-1
remember
lead.
this game.
You should remember this game. It was like it was intense
Yeah, I remember this. I don't like either team, but I remember this.
because it was intense. The
Hmm.
Warriors had a 3-1 lead in the series, and they were the favored to win team.
Of course.
And at a crucial moment in the game, James called a timeout after a series of intense plays and all of these turnovers. The team was on edge. The game on the championship were hanging literally on the line. Like they lost, they were done. And LeBron's decision to call the timeout came at this pivotal point when the game was becoming chaotic. The timeout allowed Coach Lou and LeBron to gather the team, recalibrate their game plan, and remind the players to stay focused on their execution. LeBron later delivered one of the most iconic blocks in NBA history. It's still on highlight reels.
It
And the
is,
Cavs completed the comeback, winning the championship. So they went down 3-1 and came back and won in 7.
which is impressive.
Yeah.
This moment shows how taking a step back, even if it's in the middle of a high pressure situation, can allow for clarity. LeBron recognized that while the game was moving quickly and intensely, the key to success was staying calm and being strategic. In life, there are moments of high tension, whether in relationships, at work, or with personal struggles, and it's crucial to pause and reflect before moving forward.
Okay. So now I feel like this is also a very fitting, like, it's a very fitting example considering the Four Nations game just had like a very similar, I mean, obviously not a very similar outcome, but very similar experience.
Yeah.
So we're gonna be talking about
Raw maple syrup.
Miracle on Ice 1980 Winter Olympics. So the US men's hockey team was facing the Soviet Union in the 1980 Winter Olympics, and they were the heavy underdogs. The Soviet
I
Union
don't know if
was
I've ever seen
considered
the
a
movie.
dominant force in ice hockey, but the young US team had upset the odds and was holding its own.
I feel
Yes.
like people need to understand, like, this was back when we didn't send our NHL players to the Olympics. This was literally
Mhm.
just a random group of guys who tried out to make the team, as where other
Exactly.
countries were sending their best players.
Yeah. Nowadays people are just like, "Oh, if it's not an NHL player, they're not skilled enough," but that's like distinctly not the case because not everyone like enters the draft. Not everyone wants to go to the NHL. Like they just want to play the sport
Mm-hmm.
and represent their country. They don't need to like represent a random team
Yeah,
for
for
a
sure.
contract. With less than a minute remaining in the game, Team USA coach Herb Brooks called a timeout. The US team had just taken the lead and the Soviet was pushing hard for the equalizer. The timeout gave Brooks the chance to give a quick motivational speech, remind his players of their defensive strategy, and settle the team's nerves in those final crucial moments. That timeout was pivotal to securing the win and ultimately the gold medal. Sometimes, in the face of something huge, whether it's a major life challenge, a work project, or a personal crisis, taking a moment to regroup can make all the difference. In high stress situations, a timeout can help you gain perspective, reassess your priorities, and come back with the clarity and determination to finish strong. Which, I mean, we could sit here for days doing a deep dive on pivotal timeouts, so I'm going to give you some honorable mentions. US versus Japan, women's soccer. That's a sport I understand. The soccer final in 2015, a timeout after the US was visibly shaken helped them recoup and take a 5-2 win. The shot heard around the world, 1951 National League playoff, Giants versus Dodgers. Giants manager called for a brief timeout to talk with his players and encourage them to stay focused and aggressive. Bobby Thompson then went on to hit a home run off of Dodgers pitcher Rolf Branca, instantly turning the tide and winning the game for the Giants. The crowd erupted, and the moment became known as the shot heard round the world. These sports moments show how timeouts serve as a tool for resetting, regaining control, and coming back stronger, whether you're on the court, field, or navigating a tough period in life.
Well, basically, what we're trying to say here with everything that we just shared with you guys is that if we think of life like a game, we need to recognize when we're overwhelmed and take that break. Calling a timeout isn't giving up. It's about regrouping and making sure that you're mentally and like physically ready to get to the next step and do what you need to do, even if that means that you need to take a pause and step back for just a second.
Like stress, burnout, frustration, they often happen when we're pushing through too much at once. And instead of being smart and logical and calling the timeout and taking yourself out of a situation, we just keep trying to push through. And it tends to end very badly.
All of that was directed at me. For anybody who's not watching, I'm sticking the fingers at her.
I'm getting middle fingers.
That was all directed at me, I promise you. So, like,
So, for the three of us, I know like I have plenty of experience and I'll give some examples, but have either of you ever reached that breaking point and realized you just need a pause to regain clarity?
Listen, like I'm not gonna go into. You guys know the details. You guys kind of know what's going on. There's just been over the past probably about 3 months. There's been a lot of like really stressful things happening, and it's almost seemed like it's been like one thing right on top of the other, and it's like you think you're kind of through like one thing, and just as you're getting to like the tail end of that, then something else pops up, and you're like, oh, what am I gonna do now? And then this thing is still going, and this thing is still going, and now this one's here too, and it's just been a lot of like one thing right after the other piling up. And right now I feel like I'm dealing with like so many things. I'm having really bad anxiety all the time, and honestly, like it's not easy to hit the timeout button. I'm having a hard time hitting the timeout button. So
Yeah.
we're preaching, press the timeout button. Someone tell me how to press the timeout button.
That's one of the best parts about this episode is we're talking about it, but we're also living it. Like,
Yeah.
like lead by example. Like, we are actively trying to better ourselves and the importance of the boundaries and the importance of saying no and the importance of just taking a step back. And while we're preaching it, we're learning how to practice it. And I think that's so important.
I mean, I think a big thing too, like I'm sitting here saying, there's so much going on and I know I need the timeout, but I can't hit the button. Even just acknowledging that you need the timeout is so crucial to being able to take it and say like,
Exactly.
okay, like I'm approaching that limit and I know that I need to like cut it. I need to stop. I need to take that step back. And even if you're not quite at that point to take the step, at least you know you need the step. Boundaries, so important.
Boundaries are very important. And I feel like not everyone realized that like even like setting the boundaries is part of taking the time out. And I feel like I couldn't tell you like a very specific like occurrence that I've been like using that recently. Although my junior year of high school, I do particularly remember I was going through like kind of like a tough time mentally, and like I had all of these expectations where I needed to be like happy for everyone and like always be like the funny friend for everyone to kind of like keep things going. And in that like situation, I kind of was like, like it's okay for me to not always be okay. Like, and I need to like tell my
Yeah, right
friends
there.
like I need to let them know like, hey, like yes, I am putting on a show for you guys. Like this isn't always like easy to do. And if other people understand that you're like you need to like take the break, you need to like not always be the person that is like lifting everyone else up, that in itself is like the break, the timeout right there.
So I like relate to that on so many levels because I quite literally said to Ashley like last week or 2 weeks ago something about how like I always feel like I have to be this like bright, bubbly person because that's who I am. Like people call me like a ray of sunshine all the time, right? And I'm happy to be that. And I love to be this happy, joyful person that, just like brightens everybody's day. When I was dealing with some of this stuff like 2 weeks ago, when it kind of came to that head and that point, I literally said to her, like, I hate this. I just want to go back to being my bubbly, like happy self. I don't want to deal with this anymore. And she was like, shut the fuck up. Like, you don't have to be bubbly all the time. You're allowed to have your problems and you're allowed to not be happy.
Exactly.
And I have a hard time with that because I feel like I have to be, but realizing that you don't have to be is so, so important.
Going off of what you just said, like how I text you that you don't have to be strong, and it's true. Like I will literally be the person who's like you're allowed to have a bad day, or there was a trend on TikTok where it was like, heal out loud. We almost lost you in silence, and that's such a big mindset for me specifically. And I think it has a lot to do with like I've always been the strong one. I'm the one that deals with all of the shit when the shit hits the fan. And there are times where I need to take a step back. And like, I don't know if it was Wednesday or yesterday. This week has been a whirlwind for me for a lot of family reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to both of you, I said, listen, like, I know that I'm going to pull myself away from this friendship. Don't let me push you away.
Mhm.
And being able to sit here and say that to someone is really important. Like, it's a
I was
big
gonna say
sign
it's
of growth.
important to acknowledge that, like you recognize, hey, this is something that I'm going to do, but it's not something I want to do. So like support through that,
Mhm.
right?
Like, literally, don't take it personally.
No.
Give me my space, but also check in occasionally if I do disappear for a while.
One thing I want to say is, we're sitting here saying, take that time out, take that pause, take that step back. That doesn't mean don't sit in the feelings. And that doesn't mean ignore the feelings or try and like push them away. Take the time out, but feel out those emotions. And don't look at me because I know that you're going to, because I don't do that. But
No, but
it's
that's very important. Like,
it's important to feel
Mhm.
it out and let yourself like
you're not going to
sit
know
in
if
that
you need the
sadness or
time
sit
out.
in that anxiety for a little bit to be able to work through it. You can't get through it if you
Mhm.
just sit there and go, I'm not going to deal with that. Yeah, it's important to not hide away from the feelings and not like say like, oh, I'm taking a timeout so I don't have to deal with this. The timeout is so that you can process it properly and carry on. Catch your
Mhm.
breath or reset or refocus or whatever it is that you need to do to be able to keep moving.
You need to recognize that you're at your limit. And
Yeah.
the other thing is learning how to say NO.
No.
Like that.
Sorry. That was really good timing.
And another thing to stress is that, like, mental health days are okay. Like, we are
Mhm.
allowed to have days where we literally just do something that's good for ourselves.
Yeah.
It's
I
okay to
think
be selfish.
I think people have a really hard time with that because I know there's people who don't necessarily struggle with, let's say, something like anxiety or um like that type of mental health thing. They don't fully understand saying like I need a mental health day.
It
Hey,
could be being stressed at work. It could be burnout. It could be a friendship issue. It can be so many different things. Need to regain clarity and, like, take that step back
yep.
and
Mhm.
acknowledge that you need to take the step back.
And that it's okay to
Exactly.
have a bad day or a bad week. That's okay too because sometimes things just don't go right. Sometimes you wake up on the wrong side of the bed and you feel like I don't know how to get through this and I need to just ruminate on that for a while.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
a bad day, not a bad life.
Mhm.
Exactly.
It's a bad day, not a bad life. That's so good. I need to print that on my wall right now.
You know,
Like, put that in a fucking book. That
Can you
was
just like text me that every morning?
yeah, I will set a reminder to text you that every morning. Just remember, taking a break helps you avoid burnout and it approach things with more clarity. Just like a sports team coming back from a timeout with a better strategy. Mental health in sports is just as important as physical health in sports. A timeout can be seen as a mental reset. So, like, if you were to think about sports games and a player who's mentally fatigued, in sports, timeouts are called to give players a mental break from the pressure. In life, we need that same approach. So, I feel like the other thing that we need to talk about is, like, players who are mentally fatigued and how they need to step away from the stress of life sometimes, too.
Well, I
Mhm.
mean, it literally happened in the NHL this year. Look at JT Miller. He took a couple days because he needed just a mental health break.
Like, you have to think, like, these people are going at it sport wise, whether it's the NHL where it's 82 games for a 6 month span, where they're literally like beating the shit out of themselves, they're beating the shit out of other people,
Mm-hmm.
they're putting their bodies through so much. Same thing with baseball, where you're out there wear and tearing your body 182 games a
I think so,
season,
yeah.
plus spring training, plus everything else they're doing, where there's all of this wear and tear, all of these motions that you're going through. Like, it's mentally draining.
Mhm.
Have either of you had mental health days?
I feel like I take those quite frequently, which is why I feel like right now I'm like, yeah, like I'm not really going through anything because what I do in my free time is I lay in bed all day. I'm like, this is my timeout. Like there's
This
so
is
many
my
times where
timeout.
people are like, oh, I did this today, I did this today, I did this today. I'm like, it's your
Well,
day off. My day
I
off
mean,
is literally meant for me laying in bed all day and kind of just like giving myself a break.
and that's completely fair. You know, if that's what your mental health day looks like, or that's what your just taking a time out and a break looks like, it could be the simplest thing, like just doing something for you. Like,
Exactly.
I mean, I get my nails done, you know, once a month or once every couple weeks because it's something for me. See?
Yeah.
I swear,
I used to
every time I get on this podcast, I have a different nail color.
We talked about how JT Miller took a step back from the NHL, and there's so
Mm-hmm.
many other players that we can use as examples who have taken steps back and out of the limelight and all of these
Mm-hmm.
things. But our lives are more mundane, and we go through these days where we need these timeouts. So I want to just kind of spitfire some maybe little sweet treats or mental health days or things that you do and that I
Mm-hmm.
do to make ourselves feel better when we're in our
Yeah,
timeouts.
that's a great idea.
um
Yeah.
I have a couple of different ways that I kind of like treat myself. And honestly, like Lauren said, everyone's way of like treating themselves is different. So like
Mm-hmm.
whether it be on my days off, I will lay in bed for most of the day because I simply just want to give my brain and my body the chance to rest and like
Mm-hmm.
recoup from the long week that I've had. And then there will be times where I'll be like, you know what? I kind of want to go out and treat myself to like
Mm-hmm.
I a couple years ago, I would frequently go to Barnes and Noble and just wander
Oh,
around and buy
as you
myself a
should.
book.
As you
Like
should.
that was such like a therapeutic like yes, I was going broke buying books, but like I also was buying something that was like going to be beneficial for like my enjoyment. Like I wanted to read this book, so I was going to. So I was going to buy it. So it was the little things.
But
Anyone
that's so true.
else? Exactly.
That's those are all really good. I think there's a lot of different things that I do too. It really depends what kind of like funk I'm in, I guess. A big thing that I do to decompress after like work or a long study session or something is, you know, I get out my book and I just like I'll curl up with my dogs or I'll curl up in my bed and I'll just read for a little while because it just shuts my brain off. I treat myself to manicures every month because it just makes me feel good and I like having them done. And there's like certain things that I really just like try to keep up with. You know, I do my hair too because it's something to just make me feel good. It brings me joy. Um, I'm trying to think, you know, I play sports. I'm very athletic, so like constantly moving my body helps a lot too, which sounds kind of weird when you say take a time out, but then you go move your body. Like I, the
Yes, but
physical
no.
activity feels good when it's not something that is like you're being forced to do. Like you're actively choosing to
Mhm.
go to the gym and say, "Hey, like I want to focus on this or I want to go shoot some hoops or I want to go lift some weights." And it gives your brain kind of like a mental reset sometimes and
Mhm.
releases
Yes.
some of those like hormones and endorphins that you need to be able to push through some things. Um Other things that I do sometimes is just like, you know, curl up with my mom or my dad and watch a movie or a TV show or like a comfort show. Just put on the TV and do something mindless, you know?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Those are spending time with my family, spending time with my friends. I'll go if I have a bad week. Sometimes I'll just be like, I'll text my best friend and be like, hey, like I'm coming over and I'll go spend the weekend with her because
Which is
it's just like
valid.
a reset for me. Because I can go there and I can lay in bed and we can just lay there and watch TikToks or whatever.
Which is
Mhm.
valid.
And it's all good.
So
Plan a
one,
Disney trip. That's how you get through tough things. Hockey's
you're gonna
another
say
one
that
too.
twice.
Hockey and sports. I watch a lot of sports and go to a lot of games. So,
A big one for me is truly like getting myself outside.
That's real. Outside, being one with nature is so like,
So it sucks right now that it's so cold.
yeah.
Mm.
But like come like the 50-degree weather, you will find me at least once a day at some point, even if it's 5 minutes walking around the block, just to get
Mhm.
myself outside.
Yeah.
Which is valid.
I was gonna say springtime is like my peak 4-mile walk time. Like I'll literally just like do my little loop.
My grandma
Which
told me
is
today to put on my heavy coat and my hat and go for a fucking walk. And I was like, yeah, you're right.
hot girl walks.
She was like, she
Yeah.
literally said, like, did you go to the gym? Are you walking? And I was like, no. And she's like, Kate, you're fucking high strung. You need to go for a damn walk. And I was like,
But it's true. The like walking is just so good for your soul. It's so good for your
yeah.
mind. It's so good for your
Well,
body.
and I haven't been able to do any of it because,
Yeah.
so I need it back.
Um,
I need it back desperately.
the
Mm.
other thing I love to do is go to coffee shops, and I will find a coffee shop I've never been to because living in New York City, obviously, there's so many of them, and
Mhm.
like the surrounding Jersey area, there's certain ones that I love. And
Shout
there's
out
some
to
that I've literally like I have a list in my phone on my notes app of coffee shops that I want to try.
Mm.
next time you come here, there's one in Ann Arbor that we need to go to. Or not Ann Arbor, Allen Park.
Okay, I'm down.
It's really
Um,
cute.
I love that. But I will find a coffee shop and I will just sit there and I can sit there for hours. I can read my Bible, I can journal, I can play with my iPad. Like
That's another thing that I do. I read my Bible or
there's
like just sit in prayer to try and
yeah,
relax.
there's so many things that I can do to get myself out of my head and into like the real world and just taking that step back.
Hmm.
Mhm.
My Bible's a big one. I'm so very much like just pray about it.
I need to get better at that, but like it is a big thing.
It's getting me through this week.
I
Mm.
believe it. We've kind of covered the things that we do to kind of reset ourselves and set that timeout spot or that boundary spot. And it's really important to remember how timeouts can really lead to clarity and growth and can really help you um, just see where you're at, step away from a situation. Um, Even sometimes stepping away from that situation can give you a new perspective on something, which is exactly what a timeout allows you to do. It allows you to take that step and to just, rather than giving it like a first person view, you get a bird's eye view or whatever it is, right? You can see the situation by removing yourself and giving yourself that break. Um, it's also really important to know that sometimes doing nothing, even just for a little bit, is the most productive option. It's the best way for you to reset and just feel like, hey, I'm ready to face this problem now.
I feel like
Um,
a really important thing there is you know your body best.
yeah,
Mhm.
you know your limits, you know your body, and you know when you need to just sit. And
And you
it's
just have to
okay to just
respect them.
sit.
Like you have to
Listen
respect
to your
your own
body.
body.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Listen to your body. Listen to your mind. Listen to your gut, soul, heart, whatever you want to call it. Like the biggest thing that we really want to emphasize with this episode is that timeouts are not about quitting. It's about recalibrating, regaining your focus, and coming back even stronger than when you came into the situation. Um, like we said with the examples that we started with, these timeouts help players refocus in a game and they help us in life too. And it's important to remember that. Um, yeah,
She's like
when life gets tough,
she's like
call a
Jack Hughes with
timeout.
all her ums.
Real. When life gets tough, call a timeout. It's not a sign of weakness, it's a strategy for success. And before we close, real quick, we want to encourage you guys to think about a time when you may have needed a timeout, or maybe you're in it right now. Use it as an opportunity to reset, take the time out, and use it as growth.
Like we have Instagram, we have Twitter, we have all of those social media apps. I want you to hit us with that
Yeah,
moment that you've had that time out. When have you had to hit the personal reset button? Share it with us
exactly.
on social media because maybe we'll share them next episode if there's any that are like
Yeah.
truly things that will help other people.
Hit us with
Mhm.
them, tweet it at us, DM us, whatever. We want to talk to you guys. We want to hear what you're thinking, and Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode. Before we go, we do just want to reiterate that it is very, very important to take a time out and take a break and step back. But you know what? It's not a good idea to take a time out from is us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, review, comment anything you do want us to talk about because eventually we are yappers, but we might run out of things to yap
We're gonna
about.
run out of topics.
But so like if there's anything you do want us to talk about, let us know and we'll consider it. We probably will talk about it.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's been this week's bitch sesh. Kind of more so like a therapy session, if I'm gonna be honest, because this was very. I felt like this was important for all of us to hear and talk about. So
for sure.
we appreciate anyone who's been listening.
Mental health matters.
Mental health. One of my favorite things to say is mental health is physical health. So take care of yourselves, whether that be your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health. Literally take care of yourselves. That's been this week's episode. We can't wait to talk even more in next week's episodes. Heart hands, everybody. Yes.
I already did them. See you guys next week. I've literally thrown hearts 3 times.
Mwah.